I'm good.
How are you?
Here. Good. So for us to start on time, Suraya or Rehana, would you guys be willing to give us a little catch up on what we did last time? Suraya, do you want to go?
What is his question?
The question was, what did we cover last time?
Oh, we covered aftermaths of Uhud.
Christina, where did we finish?
Well, the last thing I wrote down was that the new law was implemented for the Jews.
Yeah.
And
Not the new law, but the Jewish law was implemented on
the Jewish law. Yes, yes, yes. I wrote it down here.
On this point, I would like to touch actually, because if we kind of, in one sense, this is one of the most difficult events to cover in the history of Islam, but so we kind of left it at a somber note. But one needs to remember that many of the other Jewish tribes were taken after, the whole city of Khyber was taken after, and none of this was done to any one of them, even though to all of them, and two tribes that did treason before, it wasn't done on them either, by the way, right? So if when we actually read the history, right, and I had told you guys when we were studying it last time that this was not directly done as a decision of Prophet Muhammad at all. This tribe had asked for an arbitrator, promised that they will be given that, and that arbitrator was the one who implemented the law. Now, there is nothing in actual religious law, there is nothing wrong for this implementation, of course, but from 1400 years after, the way our sensitivities are, it just gets very heavy for us. So one needs to remember that this was the only incident, and several of the other tribes had done the same stuff again over and over and over again, and they were taken in battle, they were taken in sieges. When Khyber was taken, actually, because we're not going to cover that whole battle, but this is maybe a good place to just quickly cover it a little bit. When Khyber was taken, Khyber was a city that was actually settled, but all of the city was a Jewish city. The lands were given back to them for them to take care of them themselves, and they were asked to pay half of their yearly produce back to Muslim, which is like absolutely opposite of what the treatment that was given to them, that should have been given to them if the law of the Torah was implemented. So always remember that. Anything else? Any other points from last time that we want to touch on before we move forward?
Yeah, I'm beginning to remember now that the somebody was going to, wasn't Prophet Muhammad, but there was somebody that said they would implement the things of Jewish law, and that was the one where every man and
very able-bodied men were
killed. Yeah, and they then asked for forgiveness, some of them, and they weren't killed.
Yeah. Some of them asked and they were forgiven. And one of the story was that this guy was given forgiveness, and he said, well, if my family's not with me, what would I do with forgiveness? And his whole family was let go of. And then he said, if I don't have my possessions, what I would do with. And when that was brought to Prophet Muhammad, he ordered that all of that should be given back to him as well. I needed to make a correction at this, by the way, and please forgive me. I had this whole sessions of Islam. I had to make several corrections that never happens to me before, but life has been a bit of jumbled up for me right now. This arbitrator that had called for, not Asad, but Saad, all right, Saad bin Muaz. He's one of the first 6 believers, one of the first 6 to 12 believers of Medina, the one who was the arbitrator, and he was a confederate of this Jewish tribe, and they had some marital relations back and forth with each other as well. So Saad bin Muaz, not Asad. I think I didn't even notice that I was saying Asad. So there is a guy, Asad, who was a chieftain of the same tribe, among the same tribes, but that's not the one who gave the verdict. And Saad himself died before all of this was over. Actually, we did cover that too, right? All right. Shall we move on? I don't know where May is. I don't see her. All right, then. So after all of this, again, as we keep on covering that, we are only covering the main sort of incidents and main battles and stuff. Average, there is about every month or less than that. Actually, there are things that are taking place consistently, because there is dozens of tribes around Arabia, and consistently this problem is springing up for Muslims. But after, as Prophet Muhammad prophesied, after the trench battle, that Quraysh themselves, which were the main culprit, at this point they have incited so much that pretty much the whole Arabia is the culprit, but nonetheless they were the main starters, the main culprit of this whole thing, right? So he has said after the trench that they will not come after us now, right? So by next season, few months after, by next year, he announces that they're going to go and do an Umrah in Mecca. So same as Baha'i pilgrimage basically is built almost on the similar lines, by the way, that Muslims had. We have several changes in it, but nonetheless, so you have a 3-day visit that we call 3-day visit. It's and then you have a 9-day pilgrimage. It's built on the Muslims have a 3-day pilgrimage that is called Umrah. It's not called pilgrimage. It's not called Hajj. Now I know those of you who are Persian background here, you guys call it, even if you go to the Karbala or something, you call them Hajis. But the Muslims at large don't consider it that way, unless you went to Mecca for the 7 to 9 day pilgrimage, which happens once a year. At the last month, during the last month, Zil Hajj, the first 9 to 10 days of that are spent during the pilgrimage, and all the rituals of the actual pilgrimage is done. Nobody's called Haji in the rest of the. Now, at this point, at the very end, at the last class, we will touch a little bit about this division for what the core element or whatever was. But just since we're talking about it, just a second, 85% of a Muslim population in the world is Sunni. 15% of the population of the world is Shia. Iran is the only actually fully governing Shia country in the world. You have a you have majority population in Bahrain. That is, there are lots of Shias in Bahrain, and there's a lots of numbers of Shias in Iraq as well. But as long as the whole entity ruling itself as a Shia country is only Iran is a Shia country. So in Shia tradition, then people going to visiting Karbala and stuff are called as Hajis, but the Sunnis don't. Sunnis will call only if you had done that once a year, not even Umrah. You go to the Umrah and come back, nobody calls you Haji. You have to do the actual 9-day pilgrimage during the once a year, last month of the year, which is on Eid al-Adha. That's what the Hajj is. Liba, do you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, yes. I don't recall people going to Karbala being called Haji.
Yeah, it's commonly called that. There are books and books about people who are called Hajis, but they didn't do the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Then in my family, they didn't.
Yeah, it's quite common.
The Umrah, that's a Hajj that you go to Mecca, but it's not during the Hajj period.
Yes. So the Baha'is have 3-day pilgrimage, we call it. And so you can go, that's separate than our pilgrimage as well. So the actual pilgrimage is a set sort of ritual, and what you do about 9 day long. So the days wise is very close to what Muslim pilgrimage was doing. The space.
So the Umrah is only 3 days.
Sorry?
The Umrah is
only 3 days. Yes. So is our 3-day visit. Our short pilgrimage that we call the Baha'is is 3 days. So yeah, and so Umrah is it only has 2 to 3 smaller rituals during that, and people do that, and you visit Mecca during that time, and it's called Umrah, and you're not called a Haji, and it's not Hajj, it's not pilgrimage. Because the word in English, pilgrimage just means you went and visited some place. It had a holy connotation in the older times, in the older language. In the modern language, we don't even take that in there. It's like, oh, okay, you're going for a pilgrimage. You claim a place that you like and you go and you call it a pilgrimage. But in Arabic and other languages, that's not how it is taken care of. So then he announces that they're going to go and do an Umrah to Mecca during the holy months. Remember that there were 4 holy months when fighting was forbidden. So when these months are starting, he announces that they're going, and the Quraysh and the Meccans, their duty was to actually allow them to enter, because that's the 4 months when everybody's allowed to, no matter what your relationships are, no matter if you are at war with each other, and so forth and so on. But during those months, the holy precincts is open to all, and no atrocities or fighting is allowed. So there were 1,500 of them.
What is the meaning? Sorry, what is the meaning of ziyarat?
Ziyarat is just visit. You're going to visit. That's the word means visiting, right? Yeah.
It means if we go to Karbala, we are doing ziyarat.
You're doing ziyarat, but you're not doing pilgrimage. Yeah. In English, it doesn't matter. English word pilgrimage, you're going visiting somebody's. You appreciate somebody and you go visit them is called pilgrimage or whatever. But in actual Arabic or Persian sense,
Ghazala,
yes.
I wanted to know Letters of the Living were from Shia background?
The Letters of the Living?
Were from Shia background?
I believe most of them were, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I believe most of them were. I believe Hujjat was not, but he was not a Letter of the Living.
Yes, he was
the
not.
one in narrating, was it
Don Regan? Yeah.
No, not narrating, Zanjan, right? The hero of the Zanjan battle was actually not. And then the one of the Letter of the Living was from Multan. I don't know about if he was from Shia background or not.
Okay, thank you.
Right? Saeed-e-Hindi was one of the Letter of the Livings. That was India got immediately the message actually right because of that. So it's quite a blessing.
Doesn't it make sense that they be Shia because the Shias are the ones who are waiting for the 12th Imam?
But Sunnis are waiting for the same essence, they just call it by a different name. So Sunnis are waiting for the same personage, they call him Mahdi, right? So every religion is waiting for the same two persons that will do the same two things, but they call them, of course, within their own traditions, they call them by different names. One of the problems that occurred to Muslims, for a challenge that became to Muslims, both for Shias and Sunnis, was that they considered the Shias will say 12th Imam will come, and then of course he is the 12th Imam, and so still under the jurisdiction of Islam and just reviving that. They understood it that way. And the Sunnis say that the Mahdi will come and he's just reviving again the actual Islam and all that. And because of the Antichrist, he does not succeed. And then Isa al-Islam would be sent. And the Shias are saying that a 12th Imam will come and then Imam Hussein will return, right? But their actual job to both ends, and for Hindus and Buddhists and Christians are waiting for the return of Christ. And Elijah or John the Baptist will return. The same is true for the Jews. And so for Buddhists, they're waiting for the fifth Buddha to return. And all of them are waiting for the same time frames, same sort of personages that will bring the same type of message and unite us and bring peace. But they all, of course, because of their backgrounds and languages too, they have different names for them. So when the Bab said that he wasn't the 12th Imam, he actually is a messenger of God, which is the highest position, actually, right? So imams were subordinate to messengers. When he said he's not the 12th Imam, he's the messenger, that became a challenge for people. And so because he brought his own book. Same for both for Sunnis and Shias.
Then what is the Qa'im?
The Qayyim is the 12th Imam.
Reduced.
Qayyim is the 12th Imam. Qayyim means the one who rise. The riser at that time is the 12th Imam.
But
most Shia understanding. But Qayyim is not quite the 12th Imam in the actuality.
But because we read somewhere that the Bab was the Qa'im.
Yes. So they were waiting for the, yes. So you see the different segments of societies have translated, interpreted this coming very differently for what it was. And it happened at that time, but both of these personalities their claims were much larger than what the people thought they should be claiming. And that became a challenge for them. So that's why they initially they said that because he said he was Babullah. He wasn't Babul, right? Mullah Hussein is Babul Bab, and the Bab himself, within the very first couple of verses of the very first revelation, he declared himself to be Babullah, the door to God. That's a manifestation of God. So because of their own misunderstandings and all that, they started saying, oh, he was saying he was Babul, he was the door to the 12th Imam, and now he's saying something else. He never said anything else. So when he was brought into the Masjid al-Wakil and he was questioned in public and said, are you saying that you are the door to the Imam? He said, I never said that. I never claimed that. And he left at that. And so the people say, see, now he's denying what he was saying, but he had never said what they were saying that he had said. It was an amazing feat of victory, actually. And many of the people who were in that mosque, they understood what he was talking about, and they became believers actually because of this interview in public. So to a believer, he was from the very beginning, he was saying what he was saying. But to the majority of Muslims, both Shias and Sunnis, he was not supposed to bring a new book. He was not supposed to abrogate the laws of the previous dispensation, which he did. So same thing God killed Christ as well, because they didn't want him to abrogate any laws. If he just said, I'm a revival type of prophet, they were fine with that. So, all right.
May I ask,
Yeah.
related this gate, as you mentioned that Hazrat Bab was a gate, Babullah.
Yes.
But are there four gates somewhere mentioned?
The 4 gates were to the 12th Imam. The story is that when the 12th Imam disappeared at a very young age, and so the believers didn't have any access to it, then somebody came and announced that they had access to him. So they used to call him the Bab, the gate to the 12th Imam. So this guy would then communicate between the 12th Imam and the people. And then he died, and he told them this other person will do it, and then other person will do it. There were 4 of them consecutively like that. And then when the 4th one passed away, he did not give them any new person to turn to. So because of that, the whole occultation story came into being, that because they never really heard the news of Imam dying or something happening, they just lost access to him. So then the story came into being to say, oh, he was alive somewhere and he will come at the time of the end. So when he said he's Babullah, then they themselves misunderstood what he was talking about. He never said that. So
Because the still community from we are coming,
yeah,
our clergy are still saying that we are the descendant of this gate, and we are connected direct with gate.
Yeah, sure. No, we are not. So I mean, the whole story doesn't make sense, right? It's a similar thing that the Christ was never killed and he left up and he'll come alive and he's been living all his life physically somewhere up in heaven. Doesn't make sense. So right. So yeah, you guys are not the only one. There are many of the almost every, I would say, religious, some community in there has similar story created about some personage. And there we are, right? So, and that's why it's really, really important every faith has urged us to get to the actual books, read the actual book, and then decide what is happening, then learn what is happening. Because I was talking to a friend today, and a few of the things I mentioned, I was like, okay, so Muslim community is now saying this and this and this, but the Quran is saying contrary to these things. So how do you justify this stuff, right? And he was like, whoa, you woke me up, right? I was like, yeah, you woke me up. Go back to your book and read it, right? So because that book claims to be the hadayat, the path to God, the guidance for mankind forever, and it is. So why don't we turn to that? And most of us turn to whoever Tom, Dick, and Harry has said whatever, commentaries or whatever, but rather than actually turning to the book. And if you turn to the book, your head becomes full of questions to what the society is doing. That's how I got here, right? So got beaten up a couple of times for asking too many questions.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So so then they decide to go for this Umrah. 1,500 gather. They had 70 camels, because you have this sacrifice that you do during the pilgrimage, which on all of the other societies you do on the day of the Eid, on the day of the celebration after the pilgrimage. It is a tradition kept in the memory of Abraham and Ishmael's sacrifice for this pilgrimage for thousands of years. And so they have this now. Some of you understand maybe I'll send you a handout later. We won't talk about too many details about. If you are interested in what rituals of the pilgrimages are, I'll send you some stuff to look at that. But there is the Hijaz area there is a number of mileage outside of the Meccan territories where the sacred territory starts. So like not these days, because you're going by ships or planes, by the time if you land in Jeddah, the neighboring city with Mecca, you actually put your ihram. Ihram is the pilgrimage clothing Muslims will wear, right? the Baha'is have been lifted those restrictions, so now you can be decent, it is said, but go there, but in whichever way you can. But for Islam, it was constituted 2 pieces of cloth. It is one on the bottom, one on the top for men, and it's just plain cotton cloth. So it's quite a scene. Millions of people just in same attire and equal in front of God, prostrating the same time. It's an amazing sight. Women are not. Women can wear sewn clothing, and for the longest time, I think they used to be simpler than like men. But these days, when you look at the Hajj, you do see them in some of the different colors and stuff and all that. But those who want to stick with the actual traditions, I have a couple of friends who have gone there. They will make like white clothing. They're sewn clothing, but they're white. They will make white clothing so they can participate in that. So you have to be in that attire before you enter Mecca, actually. So they when they reach a spot where now the Meccans have learned soon enough that this force is coming. They were not carrying war weapons. It was quite obvious that they were actually going for this, but because this happened right after the Battle of Trench, that the Meccans, the Quraysh, 10,000s of them, many different tribes participating, lost and got humiliated. They were too proud about it, and they actually decided they were not going to allow Muslim to enter. Now, for thousands of years of local laws, they were not allowed to take such action, but they did. So they actually sent. So the Muslims had about only like 20 people on horses that were on the vanguard for security and stuff, that they were riding in front of these people. So the Meccans sent a couple of hundred horse riders to sort of intimidate them. Some of you guys, if you have actually watched the movie, you do see this scene. They've simplified it, of course, a lot, but it is it was a lot bigger than what they were doing. But so the Muslims were, of course, asked not to retaliate, not to we just be calm, be patient. When they learned that they were not going to let them enter, the Prophet actually made the whole company move in a very different spot than from where they mostly would have entered. That whole spot, that's what is called the Hudaybiyah. Really, that's why it's called the Truce of Hudaybiyah. When they did that, the Meccans got a little bit cautious, because then they were worried. If what happened was that the Prophet Muhammad had actually asked if somebody, deputations were coming back and forth. They were only a few miles from Mecca, so people were coming back and forth from Mecca. Prophet Muhammad himself had asked if they had sent somebody in. He got beaten up and kicked out. So he asked if one of the main companion from Mecca, if somebody can go and who has some authority and space with them, to tell them in person and appropriately that we have only come for this purpose. We have not come to fight. And as soon as we fulfill our Umrah rituals, we will leave Mecca. We are not here to fight. He actually wanted to send Umar, but Umar said that he doesn't have any protection in the city anymore, and they actually kind of hated him too. So it's like he will be in danger. So he suggested that it should be Usman who should go. And so they agreed, and Usman agreed, and Usman was sent in. Prophet Muhammad actually sent a written letter with his own seal, describing that they've come here for this purpose. They have no intention of fighting. These are the sacred months. They have the right to do this, and the Quraysh should not make an issue of it. The Quraysh started. Usman went. They received him. They read the letter and all that, but they said, no, we cannot allow you that. You maybe can come next year, but not this year. You must go back. Now, you remember, these people have traveled on, this is 250 miles of traveling in that time. And you come, and it's like, nope, you turn around and leave. They said they wouldn't. They would not let them enter. And then they retained Usman. They wouldn't let him leave after all of this. They thought that if they keep him hostage, then they could have better negotiations. Now that, of course, alarmed the Muslim camp, because the previous guy was beaten almost really badly. And so what if, people started saying that he would have been actually killed. So Prophet Muhammad then called every one of them under a tree and took another oath that they will not leave Osman in the Meccans' hands. And if it came to want to rescue him, they will. So when this happened, some of this news would have reached Mecca as well, and so they were even more concerned about what was coming their way. The Prophet Muhammad actually, as soon as he arrived at the first place, he had already said that he would grant Quraysh whatever they wanted. When they reached Hudaybiyah, remember how he was again riding his that white camel, Qaswa, right? The Qaswa is the one who decided where he should live in Medina. Remember that story? When they arrived in Medina, he said, "Leave my camel alone, wherever it sits." And that was a perfect thing because it did not annoy anybody. You know, it's like if he chose somebody, they're like, "Oh, okay, you're doing," you know. So Qaswa, when they reached Hudaybiyah, actually it was a big ground, and she partially sat down as soon as they entered. And some of the believers said that she's tired. And Prophet Muhammad said, no, she's not tired. She's under the same command she always has been. And the same power that held Abraha from entering Mecca. Remember, that was the year Prophet Muhammad was born, when the Yemeni governor came and attack and demolish Kaaba, and his forces were decimated. He's mentioning that, and he says the same force that had the same power, meaning God, that has restrained the previous invaders, is asking us to not move forward. And he said that today, whatever Quraysh would ask of him, he will grant them that. And the Muslims had no intention, of course, to violating the sanctity of sanctuary. So, but the Meccans wouldn't know that or wouldn't trust it, right? So they camped in.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm getting a little confused. It could be the medication, but why didn't they want the Meccans? Why didn't they want to let the Muslims in?
Because remember, they just previous year, like not even a full year ago, they had
because of the battle.
War. Yeah, they lost the battle of the Trench. Not just the Quraysh, but 10,000 people were not all Quraysh. The Quraysh was barely a few thousand out of that, right? So all the tribes that came, they got humiliated, and they are the worst inveterate enemies of Muslims. So even if they trusted their goodness, you still will think that, you know.
Yeah, so it's a retaliation.
It's a retaliation, yeah, which they were not allowed. According to they were not Muslims. According to the local Arab laws, during the sacred month, you cannot stop anybody entering Mecca. That's what the whole purpose of sacred months was, that because they fought and there was so much bloodshed among them that these sacred months were created so people could actually go, and because pilgrimage has been there since time of Abraham, so they could go and visit Mecca, the Holy Shrine. So they will not allow them. So the deputations went back and forth. They consistently started saying that no. So Prophet Muhammad sent them the message. His message was, why don't you leave me alone? Let me do this. We only come for this purpose, and you stop fighting me. I mean, didn't you learn your lessons, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but stop fighting me. And so at this point, the whole of Arabia is standing against them, right? So he offers them this thing of this future in sight, and he says, leave me alone. Let me deal with the rest of Arabia. You leave me alone because you've tried you did enough. And then if at the hands of all of these enemies I'll perish, you have no worry about me, right? I'm done. That's what you wanted anyway. And if I win, if God will grant me victory over everything, then you will have a cause to believe and look at this anew. So why don't you leave me alone? So they did understand that he was offering them peace. He was asking them, why don't you just now? I mean, you have done enough. It's been 19 years, right? 19 years since the inception of the thing. They are killing and pillaging Muslims. In Mecca first, everything they tried, and then by armed battles, right? Consistently, they've been doing this for 19 years. So some of their leadership of other tribes that are around, they start pressing Quraysh as well, that, you know, he's offering you this, he's reasonable, why don't you take that? Some of them that have come, like 3, 4, 5 messengers were sent back and forth from Quraysh. And everyone that came and saw the scene of these people and how Prophet Muhammad was treated and who he was to the believers, it was very impressive for them. Very, very impressive for them. So a couple of them got really touched by all of this, and they are trying to convince the Quraysh to do this. Their pride is too big that they don't want to go back on their words. So they finally agree that they will write a peace treaty with Prophet Muhammad, but the main condition of that still was that they cannot enter Mecca this year. They must go back this year, and they can come back next year if they want. I mean, it's a way of humiliating you, really, in a sense. So the Muslims did felt terribly humiliated. Prophet Muhammad agreed. So they finally send their messengers to complete this issue. Prophet Muhammad calls Imam Ali to write it down. I keep on calling him Imam Ali because for us he is, even though historically speaking at this time he wasn't yet, right? So he calls Imam Ali to write it down. And remember we said this, that no matter what is being said about Prophet Muhammad will always write down treaties. Wherever he sent out, it was sent in writing. So so Imam Ali sits down and starts writing. The Meccans are the one who dictated that. And let me see, let me find out, maybe I can read it. So the clauses of roughly the clauses of the treaty were that they will not fight Muslims for 10 years. They declared that they're willing to have a 10-year long peace. So then whatever happens after, right? 10-year long peace, they will not attack each other. The Muslims will not attack Quraysh. Quraysh will not attack Muslims. Those who want to make treaty and become confederates with Muslims, they should be allowed. Those who want to become treaty and become confederates with Quraysh, they should be allowed. And then the whole entity of yourself and confederation is treated as one lump sum, right? That was already the law of the land. So if 5 of us are confederates, even though we are not from the same tribe, then any wrong done to you means wrong done to me. So that's how the local law worked. Then they had the clause that if somebody became Muslim from Quraysh, from this end, and was able to run away and went to Medina, but his guardians, parents or whoever, did not agree that they should become Muslim and run to Medina, that Muslims are bound by the duty to return him to his people, right? But if a Muslim ran away and came to Mecca, the Meccans are not obliged to return him, which, I mean, if a Muslim wants to leave Islam, who wants them back anyway? So, we're not worried about that one. But, and so 10 years of this, and that they cannot enter Mecca, and they should come back next year.
Sorry, Ghazala, sorry, I didn't understand that. So if a Quraysh runs to Medina because they want to become Muslim or anything, they're not allowed anymore to become Muslim. They have to be returned to their tribe.
I mean, they can't stop them from being beaten and being a Muslim, but what was not allowed to them to go join the Muslims.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? So if you want to be, and one of them were consistently beaten over this before liberation came to them. So, but they were not allowed to go to Medina, and Medinians were were asked to return them. Okay. When they started writing this, you will see this is a true scene. I mean, all the movie scenes are true scenes, by the way. It's just that they have shortened a lots of stuff. And because they couldn't show the primary companions, because Muslims are attached to that, not just they couldn't show Muhammad, they couldn't show, Abu Bakr, Osman, Umar, and Ali, and so forth and so on as well. So you see lots of stuff done from Hamza's sort of angle, even though Hamza was not main core element in the story. In reality, the way Ali was, Umar and Osman or Abu Bakr were, right, and several other Ansar were like always there, and they were doing this thing. But because Muslims will not want to have to see them, so they had to build it this way in the movie. So remember that always too. So in the actuality, it's Imam Ali who's writing it, and but the scene is otherwise true, right? So. And that's where you get the glimpse of what some of their contentions were. So the writing was write in the name of Allah, from Muhammad, messenger of Allah, write in the name of Allah, the Rahman, the Rahim, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And he immediately objects, which is true. They immediately object, the Meccans, and they say, who is this Rahman and Rahim? We don't understand him, just write Allah, because they did accept Allah, right? So, and so Rahman and Rahim actually are new names of God, Islamic God, right? In Islam, not Islamic God. God is all same for us. And there is new name of Baha in this. That is name of God. It's still the same. Allah wa Baha is still Allah. Allah is glorious. Ar-Rahman, Allah Ar-Rahman. Allah is Rahman. Allah is Rahim, right? So actually, because the Baha'is have more of the habit of, because of this, whatever we call it, we pay attention to Baha, but we often forget that it is Allah, right? Hu Allah, He is God. And the word in writings is still, the name is still Allah. We use the same thing. The Christian Arabs in the Christian Bible use the same thing. It's Allah. Allah is the Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew word with a little bit variation of pronunciation for that one God who's Allah. Yes, Rihanna.
My father-in-law, God bless him, now he is no more. He was a very learned man. He knows many languages, and he was well aware of history. But he had great opposition with my husband that you call Baha'u'llah as Allah. You are sharing Baha'u'llah as Allah. We don't say Muhammad. We say Muhammad Rasulullah.
Baha'u'llah means glory of God. It's a title of God.
Literally, he was to take it tumne to Baha'u'llah.
Yeah, but you know, every opposition community has created these kind of things where they point fingers at each other without understanding what is happening, right? So the Quran is a revelation in first person from God, right? So God is saying this and this. You see that in the Baha'i writings as well. You see that first person revelation. I am God. That is God talking, right? That is God talking himself. That's how the Quran talks. And so the previous ones pointed the same fingers at Muhammad, by the way, right? So anyway, and again, when we don't actually dissect and truly learn what is happening, that's where all of our contentions come from, right? So, for example, you have the kalima for the shahada, they call it. For kalima for Muslims to become a Muslim is La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, right? No God but Allah. Muhammad is his prophet. Muhammad is his messenger. Rasulullah, not even Nabi, right? Muhammad is his prophet. That's it. That's all in Arabic. Almost all of the Muslims now are doing this. And I have not seen that growing up, but lately I've seen this over and over again. Even the top ulamas that are really good, sincere people and well deepened in their faith, and they will translate it. There is no one worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad is his last prophet. Give me one word in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Where is the word last? Right. So it's okay that you translate nobody's worthy than worship of Allah, which is fine. But even though the wording itself doesn't quite contain that meaning, but okay, we mean it that way, which is fine because we know that that's what God says. That's what God means. Yeah. But where is the word last? Where is the word last in the kalima?
In Farsi, we say Khatamul Anbiya.
Yes, but not in the kalima though.
No.
Not in the kalima. You can't add words to God's verses. All right. So you can say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, and we believe that Muhammad is his last prophet. You are free to say that. But you are saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah in itself contains and means there is no one worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad is his last prophet. You are doing tahrif in the word of God, which is condemned in the Quran, and it was condemned to other people, previous people, to do tahrif in the wordings of God, right? Adding or deleting in the actual scriptures. You're not allowed that. And yes, he's the last of the prophets. The Baha'is believed he is the last of the prophets too, by the way. That's not the contention. Now you're adding that word into everything you say. That's not allowed to us. That's calling partners with God, and God forbid. I mean, that gives me goosebumps, you know, of terror.
I want to say something.
Yes.
Some people on WhatsApp, when they want to write, they write only Abha.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. They have to write Allahu Abha.
They can say Abha too if they want. I mean, we are not.
Abha is great.
Yes.
Abha
glorious.
Means great.
Abha is glorious.
Yes, but we have to write Allahu Abha.
Allahu Abha, yes. Yes. So when Guardian said all of these are his names, they are Baha'u'llah's titles. Baha'u'llah as a person is not called God. When he says, nay, I am coarser than clay, Baha'u'llah says, right? When I look at myself and my relationship to thy revelation, oh my God, I'm moved to say I am God, because the revelation is I am God. But when I look at myself, my human self, I'm coarser than clay. There's nothing that binds us, right? So anyway, so they say, what is this Rahman and Rahim? We don't know Rahman and Rahim. Just say Allah, and who is this messenger of Allah? We don't. If you believe that you are a messenger of Allah, we wouldn't be fighting today, right? So they object, and so Prophet Muhammad says, okay, then erase it, because Ali has already taken the dictation and he wrote it, and Imam Ali says, I can't erase it. Once I have written that Muhammad is Rasulullah, I cannot erase it. So Prophet Muhammad took the paper himself and erased it. He was, all his life, he was so accommodating to all of these people. And so he erased it and he says, okay, so then it was written in the name of Allah, between Muhammad, son of Abdullah, and such Amr bin Sahel, whatever his name was, Sahel bin something. That was the NY of the Quraysh. So the treaty was signed this way, and they agreed. And while they just signed it, and same guy from Quraysh, Suhail, his name was, his son had apparently become a believer, and he was terribly beaten. And he somehow, because he said he learned that the Muslims were camped there for almost 20 days. So when he learned the Muslims were camped 3 miles from Makkah, he somehow arranged and escaped, and he arrived just at the time and they just signed the treaty. He was in chains, and his whole body was full of wounds. It was quite obvious he'd been tortured for it, and they couldn't retain him. They had to return him because they just signed the treaty, and everybody was, in tears, but there was nothing they could do. Prophet Muhammad said, we must keep our words. We must keep our words. We just signed that we'll do this. So he actually was taken. Prophet Muhammad actually begged his father, who was there writing the treaty, let him be, let him be here. And he said, no, you promised that he will be returned. He'll be returned. My mother would have done the same thing, by the way. So yeah, he was returned, and it took him much later, and he finally was able to join the Muslims, but that's a future story. So this happens, and then the whole treaty is, so then they say, okay, so you can't enter. So they leave. Prophet Muhammad, the whole camp is somber, right? They felt humiliated. Prophet Muhammad says, it's okay, it's okay. So it goes, okay, sacrifice your animals, even though we didn't get in and do it, but the ones you brought it for that purpose, sacrifice them. And so one of the Islamic pilgrim ritual is, which Baha'u'llah abrogated, by the way, to shave your head. You do the sacrifice, and after that the men shave their head, and women are like supposed to just cut a lock or something, or some amount of hair. So it's a Islamic pilgrimage ritual. When you read that Baha'u'llah says don't shave your heads, then and because of this, you will see that a lot of Shias actually would have like a permanent sort of ritual of having shaved heads, even if you go to Karbala or somewhere else, and this and that day shave their head, which is abrogated in Baha'i writings. So he asked them to do that, do this thing, and then let's pull up camp and move forward. And they are so disturbed that they don't even they as if they totally even didn't hear him. They totally ignore him, and he's really saddened by this sight. And so he moves into his tent, and then comes out a little bit after, and actually starts doing what he told them to do himself for his own animals that were supposed to be, and what he was supposed to be doing himself. So when they watch him, then they kind of, as if they just woke up, and they kind of follow the instructions, and the whole camp is moving back, and they're really in solemn sort of mood. It is one of this, there is few events when you see Umar's personality coming out, right? You saw that after Badr too, when he was saying, kill them all, break their teeth and stuff like that. He was always of that type of temper. So he actually went and questioned Prophet Muhammad, and he says, this is humiliating. Why are we writing this? Why are we letting this happen? And he tries to calm him down. The Prophet of God tries to calm him down, and he's angry, and he was like, aren't you not the Rasulullah? And he says, yes, I am. Are you not the messenger of God in truth? And he says, yes, I am messenger of God in truth. Then why are we doing this? Didn't you tell us that we will actually do the tawaf? It's called the tawaf when you circumambulate the Kaaba. The Baha'i pilgrimage has the same ritual too, by the way. We do circumambulate the shrines. So Another thing that I will want to touch at this point is that Muslims after don't touch on it, and most of us, I growing up, never heard of it, but the historians actually write about this was shrine of Ishmael. Ghazala writes it that way too. So to me, actually, I don't know. I mean, some future history will say why that thing is used, but I wonder if Ishmael is actually buried in the ground where the Holy Mosque is. Right. So, there is a Maqam Ismail that has rituals in the things, but the Muslims don't consider that as the burial ground of Ishmael, and I wonder if it is. If that can be found out, lots of their contentions will go away from about what's happens in the new Qiblas. Anyway, so he argues with him, and Prophet Muhammad said yes, because his point is similar as when the Bab said, I will make you in Kufa when you come back from pilgrimage, and if God does not will that, I will send you the new instructions. But some of the believers forgot that he said, if God doesn't will it, and when God didn't will it, and he couldn't go to Kufa, and he was brought to Shiraz instead, some of them actually apostated their faith, because saying that he did not fulfill his promise. If he was a prophet of God, he would have not had given us a false prophet, and that's what Umar is doing at this moment, right? Whatever his intention was, but in essence, that's what he's doing. It's like, aren't you the prophet of God? And he says, truly the prophet of God? He says, yes, I am. Then didn't you say that we will actually do circumambulation? And Prophet Muhammad at this point somberly, quietly says that, yes, I did say you will do the circumambulation. Did I say you will do it this year? And Umar kind of backs off listening to this and say, yeah, you didn't say you will do it this year, right? So, but he's not calmed down. So he goes and then complains about it to Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr finally warns him and he says, what are you doing? Don't do this. And remember, some of those companions who are considered among the leadership, people listen to them. They don't just listen to Prophet Muhammad. When they give somebody a station and stuff and all that, they listen to these people too. So if you're doing that, you're actually aggravating the believers quite a bit, because you don't understand. How are they going to understand? So Umar's own story, he tells this story himself, by the way. People have not labeled it on to him. So Umar himself tells this story, and he says after Abu Bakr kind of woke him up, he was so taken by remorse for what he had done. And he said when the people started marching back to Medina, he had tried to approach Prophet Muhammad more than 3 times, and he wouldn't talk to him. And he said his soul just depleted, that he was done. God would hate him, and soon enough God will send a message and say, he was done. He's out of the thing because he has done this. And every time Umar will do this, Umar himself tells the stories about himself, by the way, and he regrets this is his personality. It will come up after all of that too, after Prophet's death, and we'll go through that a little bit. But we are who we are, and so then when they reached quite close to Medina and not quite yet there. When they bickered about it, Prophet Muhammad told them this was a victory, and they could not understand it. And he kept on saying, this is a victory, don't have this mood. So when they arrive closer to Medina, they will camp at night and travel during daytime. And so at one point, the announcer came out and it said the Rasulullah was calling Umar bin Khattab. That's what his full name was. And he said that my heart just sank, right? And it was announced that a new revelation has come, and Prophet of God, Rasulullah, is calling Umar bin Khattab. So Umar says that his soul just sank, that he was right, that God is going to send a revelation, especially to just get him kicked out. So a revelation did come, and it actually said, there are a few verses about Hudaybiyah. One of them is 48, Surah 48:19. Allah was indeed well pleased with the believers when they swore allegiance to thee under the tree, which when he took allegiance that all of them will actually stand, and whatever it takes, they will not leave Osman alone. And he appreciated the surge of faith in their hearts and sent down tranquility on them and rewarded them with a victory near at hand. So the next revelation was, surely, it's again 42, Surah 42, verse 2 to 4 and 28. Surely we have granted thee a clear victory, so that Allah may open the way to cover up all thy shortcomings, past and future, and that he may complete his favor unto thee. and may guide thee along the right path for success. Surely Allah will help thee with a mighty help. Allah has in truth completely fulfilled for his messenger the vision that he had vouchsafed him, namely that you will surely enter the sacred mosque, if Allah so wills, in security, with your heads shaven or clothes cropped, and having no fear. So they did actually return next year, and they did the Umrah, but not this year. So, so again, now that they, another door of counsel talking was open, because they all were feeling bad because they'd done wrong. He had ordered them to do something, and they were like, too sullen about it. So now they get the opportunity, and they started talking. And Umar himself asked Prophet Muhammad, he says, Ya Rasulullah, is it actually a victory? How is this a victory? So Prophet Muhammad explains to them to listen. We were not the ones who wanted all these fights and all this persecution. It's they who wanted all these fights. And they have just given you 10 years of peace. They've given you 10 years of peace. They have promised that just a few months ago, they were at your doors. He tells them that. Just a few months ago, they were at your doors and your hearts were in your throat. That's what Qur'an describes. They were so fearful during that time, especially because of the treason of the tribe on the back, and the whole city is besieged. And they didn't think that they will come out of that alive. And he says, God given you this, and now those same people have just given you 10 years of peace. That's what we want. Our whole purpose here is teaching of the faith, not of fighting. And that's what you want. Can you imagine what we can do with this? Right? So it reminds me again of when there are 7 stages of becoming to the commonwealth of the Baha'i faith. The Guardian describes those, right? So we have actually accomplished the first 3 or 4 already. There are 2 or 3 left to get to. One of the stage was emancipation from the Islamic orthodoxy, because they did not believe, they did not give us or status. And so they kept on calling us a sect of Islam, and that's why they persecute Baha'is in the Iran, by the way, because if you're not your own religion, then you don't have any freedom. If you are within my own people and you're doing wrong, then I want to punish you according to my laws. But their laws are not implementable onto me. I have my own faith. I have my own laws. So in freedom of religion, it will require of nations to give me my own status. And that was not given for the very long time, until that case happened in Egypt, where the top clergy declared us as heretics, but nonetheless, that we have our own faith. We cannot come under the protection of Islam, they said. This was actually a hardship and a terrible thing. And a couple of Baha'is were actually forced to divorce their wives, because their wives were Muslim and their families would not let them have it, now that they declared not Muslims, non-Muslims. And in the event of this, the Guardian wrote to the Baha'i world and said this was a great victory, right? This was a great victory. Now, all of us are suffering, we are crying, and those who actually got beaten up and stuff and had their families broken, they are even like, in worse condition. And here the Guardian writes and says, this is victory. You got emancipated. The top institution in Islam, in the whole world of Islamic world, just declared you your own religion. Finally, you've been asking for it for 100-some years, right? And so I often laugh with my Muslim friends that there are Ahmadis who say we are Muslims, and you say, no, you can't be Muslim, so you persecute them. And here we are Baha'is, we say we are non-Muslim, we are our own faith, and you say, no, you can't be your own faith, which way do you want to go? So that this event reminds you of that, right? So the messengers of God and his chosen ones, which then for us, for Islam, it's messenger of God and Ali, his chosen ones, and Hassan and Hussein are their chosen ones, who have this vision. And for us, it was Abdul Baha and the Guardian. Nobody else has this future vision, by the way, right? Just we lost it with them, but they wrote enough for us to depend on. They have this vision of the inner meaning and inner understanding and future vision of what is happening and where it is taking you. Most of us are just too emotional at moment-to-moment basis, and Umar himself will say that once it was described to him, now he could see that, but he was just we are too short-sighted. We're too impatient. Quran calls it that way. You're too impatient, right? Sorry, Rehana, you were about to say something?
Yeah, in which year this declares that Baha'i is an independent religion? Year I
Oh, I will send it to you. My brain is middle of focused in here, and sometimes the numbers don't come right, and because it's getting recorded, I'm not going to record something wrong. So I'll send it to you after we finish the class. It happened during Guardian's time. So it's in God Passes By the way. I've been urging you all to study it, right? So all of these things are there. All right, so then they come back to Medina. There are several different other things happening around. The war has not ended for Muslims, by the way. The war with Quraysh has ended, but Quraysh is not the only tribe. Remember we said since Badr and Uhud, and then Khandak even brought it even more of animosity because in the Battle of Trench, so many other tribes were involved. They're not going to forget that they got humiliated and lost. So, right, it's a consistent problem. Nonetheless, the Quraysh itself is backed off. So it is during this time when then Prophet Muhammad will send out those famous letters to the kings that we often talk about. And there were 8 letters sent out. And the Bab sent 8 letters too, by the way, and I'm not going to tell you who. I want all of you to investigate that, and before next class, send me a homework email. Tell me which monarchs and the leaders of world the Bab wrote his address to. Right? We all know Baha'u'llah, but Baha'u'llah wrote to 9 of them. But the Bab wrote to several of them, 8, I believe, and I want you to find out and tell me who.
I never heard that Muhammad had written to the
Really?
kings also. Yeah.
Really? It's one of the most famous historical event of Islam.
Yeah, that's new information for me. Yeah. Thank you.
So he writes to, there are 8 of them. He writes to the Heraclius of Rome. This letter reached to him in Jerusalem. To Khosrow of Persia, the Viceroy of Egypt, the governor of Yemama, king of Ethiopia, the king of Ghassan, the king of Yemen, and king of Bahrain, right? So, or the governor of Bahrain. There, some of them were kingdoms, some of them were governorships under either Persia or Rome. Actually, all of these were either under Rome or Persian territories. So these letters were sent during this time of truce. Historically speaking, the most numbers acquired under Islam happened during this truce time. So those who have actually now investigated there, as I sent you my bibliography of writers, those are mostly Western writers. I do depend on, of course, Muslim histories too, but those who have sincerely investigated, and that's what the Guardian has made our duty to do, sincerely investigate and correct the mistakes. They will all write now this way, that all of this whole blame on Islam that is spread by the sword is absolutely nuts. There's no backup to it ever, right? So the numbers themselves will show soon enough. All right, so the letters, so the Heraclius was in, they started, remember we talked about Rome, there were several prophecies of Rome winning, started in Mecca, started during their boycott time actually, and Meccans used to laugh at them, like, really? Because that's how precarious Rome had become around that time. And the Quran said they will win soon, and Muslims will win. And like, yeah, you will win. You're dying, your children are dying hungry or under oppression, and you are saying that we will win. And so that happened around Badr. The Muslims won against Quraysh, and the Romans started winning against Persia. And most of those territories, like what we call Iraq and Jordan and these areas around, were actually taken back by Rome, which Persia has taken within last 30 some years. There were actually more a fiery sort of war going on between them. It was, for most historians, will say for 100 years this was going on that way. And some of the historians, if you read them actually, and they will prove it to you, that it was for 700 years they were at each other's throat. And that's what gutted both Iran and war does that to you. So, so he was, because he started winning, he made a vow that he will, when Persians took over Jerusalem, they actually, some of the things were looted and taken away from the temple. So the emperor was going back. There is a original cross of the old times, and he was installing that back into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That was his pilgrimage vow. So he was in Jerusalem. Before this, the letter would arrive him, he was actually into astrology. That's what has caused Zoroastrians as well to be very keen on this issue. The 3 Zoroastrian Magi that went for Christ, that's what they said. They said they have seen a new star. Baha'u'llah writes about it. The Bab writes about it, that there is always new stars that are discovered in heavens, in the actual stars, every time the time of the new manifestation is up. We common people don't know the knowledge. We don't know how it works, but there are people, it's historically is proven there are those who understand this. So Heraclius, who was into this, he apparently had seen that, he was disturbed about it. So when he consulted with his people that he has seen this, the interpretation of this they made was, and it's quite amazing, right? I don't know how. I mean, I have zero knowledge of this side of sciences. He said this meant that there is a new prophet rising among the people of the ones who do circumcision, right? So he asked his people, he says, the Christians don't. So he says, especially Romans don't. So he says, who does circumcision? And they said that the Jews do circumcision. And he said, but they're not, they're too weak. I mean, they were kicked out for so long at this point and persecuted so long. And so he says, there is no way that, because the new prophet is showing victory, that he'll be victorious. So it was actually a little bit after somebody told him that the Arabs do it too, right? The Arabs, because it's an Abrahamic tradition. So the Arabs did it too. So it was soon after this thing that the messenger arrived in Jerusalem carrying Prophet Muhammad's letter for him. So the letter, 1 or 2 of them are historically still available, by the way. The one that was sent to Egypt was found in 18th century, and it's in a museum in Turkey. And so it was quite a finding, because lots of times the Westerns are pointing fingers at, they don't believe whatever the Muslims say. And this was like, they've been writing about historically what was written in these things, and that letter came out to be exactly what they've been saying for 1300 years, what was written. So the letter of the text is, in the name of Allah. Mostly that's how letters were written. They were pretty short. What was, now Baha'u'llah has long tablets to these kings, right? So Prophet Muhammad's letters are almost a page long sort of tablet. And what was happening was that it was just a basic invitation to Islam, and the letters were sent with some of the very most capable and deepened Muslims. So the idea was that then they could answer your questions and deepen you and teach you, and they will actually carry whatever was with them of the Quran for teaching purposes. So it is said that one of the most handsome of Arabs was the one who was sent to Heraclius, that even in Jerusalem, it became famous how beautiful he was. And there are other stories about this, that sometimes they'll say that Gabriel will come in a human form, and he looked like this young man. He was so amazingly handsome, and it is him who's been sent. So in the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, from Muhammad bin Abdullah, messenger of Allah, to Heraclius, the chief of Byzantine. It was the Roman Empire, was now the Eastern Roman Empire that we call Byzantines. Peace be on him who follows the guidance. I invite you to the acceptance of Islam. Be a Muslim and enter into the security of Allah. Be a Muslim and Allah will reward you doubly. If you turn away, you will bear the responsibility for your subjects. This is the line Baha'u'llah repeats in the Kitab-e-Gan in many places, right? That the leaders of people are highly responsible for them walking away from the faith. All of us are. He says that too, right? In that same book. All of us are responsible, but there is so much higher responsibility on the leaders of humanity. Almost in every letter of Prophet Muhammad, this sentence is there. This warning is there, right? If you turn away, you will bear the responsibility for your subjects. People of the book, let us agree upon one matter. This verse is from the Quran, by the way, which is the same for you and for us. Namely, that we worship none save Allah, only one God, right? and that we associate no partner with him, and that some of us take not others for lords besides Allah. Then, if they turn away, say to them, bear ye witness that we have submitted wholly to Allah. What does Baha'u'llah say in Kitab-i-Gan? Say it is from God, and leave them to their cavillings, right? So when they object on this, then say this is from God and leave them to their cavillings. So when the letter was read, because of course it would have been read by translators because you're writing, I want to touch on a couple of other issues on this actually, that when Prophet Muhammad announced that he was going to send these letters, then some of those who had been ambassadors of Arab tribes to the other nations before, some of these people who have sent out for those are those kind of caliber of people that are sent out with these letters. One of them said that, I've noticed that the kings and everybody, they want your seal on things or they won't accept it. Unless your seal is on it, they don't know if somebody else wrote it or you wrote it, right? So Prophet Muhammad agreed to that, and that's when his seal was created. A ring was created for him that became his seal. And that ring, it gives me goosebumps too, by the way. I think mostly we don't pay attention to it. And take it with a grain of salt. This is just my personal vision to that. I call it the ring symbol. The Baha'i ring has the ring stone symbol. So the way Prophet Muhammad's ring was created was, in Arabic, the word Allah was on the top, messenger was in the middle, and Muhammad was at the bottom, right? Allah, messenger, Muhammad as a person itself, right? So because the messengership is the one that is the spirit of God that comes to us. And now when the Bab created the ringstone symbol, then you have the word of God on the top, you have the world of the manifestations in the middle, he says, and the bottom one is us. The bottom one is our world. And then that line that crosses is the spirit of God that unites us all through the manifestations. Otherwise, there'll be no connection between us and God, or even the worlds of manifestation. So it just, as I said, it gives me goosebumps, but sorry, yes, Liba? Your mic is off.
I'm sorry.
No
I'm
worries.
sorry. The symbol of Muhammad, is it when it says Allah and
Messenger
Muhammad,
and Muhammad.
Rasul, yeah, is that written words or is it a symbol?
It was written word. It was Allah, Messenger, Rasul, Muhammad. Allah, Rasul, Muhammad, right? Rasul Allah. So Allah is on the top always. And this is what Khosrow objected, by the way. How dare he put somebody else's name above my name? That was his first objection. So the courtier who delivered the letter to the king here objected on the same issue. Not only that, he said that he's using this Allah of his and his own name before the emperor's name, but he's calling the emperor the chief of Byzantine rather than the king of Byzantine, right? So they were offended by it. And but Heraclius did not care about that. He actually dismissed their things, and they asked. So he does not yet read the letter. This is very impressive, actually. I have great respect for this guy. So before the letter is read, he asks his courtiers to go find him some Arabs who are from Mecca, from the area where this claimant, he called them, is. So when they looked around, they actually found, and this would be days, right? Because Jerusalem is quite far away at that time from Syria. They found Abu Sufyan, who inveterate enemy of Prophet Muhammad, right? But they've just signed the Hudaybiyah Treaty. He was in Syria on a caravan with a couple of other Meccan Arabs with him. So the soldiers found them and took them to the court of Heraclius. So when they were brought to the court, the king asks them, is there any one of you who's closer in relationship to this guy, to Muhammad? So Abu Sufyan said, this is his story in his own words, by the way, right? So Abu Sufyan said, I am the closest in kinship, because he actually is a cousin of Prophet Muhammad, right? So he's a cousin of Prophet Muhammad. So he said, the emperor, through interpreter, this is happening. So emperor says, I have some questions of you that I want to put forward to. And so he says, he lined them up. He put Abu Sufyan on the front and the other 2-3 behind him. He lined them up that way. And then once he lined them up, he told them, he says, I have some questions to ask of Abu Sufyan. And when he answers that, if he lies to me, he tells the other 2-3, you motion to that he's lying. Right? independent investigation of truth. This guy actually did that, all right? I'm really impressed, and the way he did it, it was really wise. So he says he lined them up that way, and then he asked his questions, and we have record of them from the story of Abu Sufyan himself. So the emperor, what is the status of this claimant among his people? Abu Sufyan, he belongs to a noble family among us. Emperor, has anyone among you made such a claim previously? Abu Sufyan, no. And the emperor actually in a side story tells why he asked these questions, by the way. So he has his reasoning why he was asking them. Had you ever known him to tell a lie before he made his claim? Remember how he was famous for being Sadiq, from a very young age? Abu Sufyan, of course, no. Emperor, was there among his ancestors anyone who was a king? Abu Sufyan, no. Emperor, are those who follow him from among your leading people, or are they weak and humble? Abu Sufyan, they are weak and humble. Emperor, is their number increasing or diminishing? Abu Sufyan, they are increasing. Emperor, has any of his followers reviled from his faith in disgust? Abu Sufyan, no. Emperor, has he ever broken his pledge? Abu Sufyan, no. But we have recently concluded an agreement with him concerning which we have some apprehension what it might lead to. He's trying to insinuate things, but the emperor is not interested. Emperor, has there been any fighting between him and you? Abu Sufyan, yes. Emperor, what's the result? Abu Sufyan, it has been like the ascending and descending of bucket in a well. Sometimes he wins and sometimes we win. Emperor, what does he teach? Right? What does he teach? This is Abu Sufyan now, inveterate enemy of Prophet Muhammad still at this point. Abu Sufyan, he tells us to believe that God is one and that we should not associate anyone with him. He forbids us to worship as our ancestors used to worship. He directs us to perform salat, prayer, obligatory prayer, give alms, zakat, shun vice, shun evil and sin, fulfill covenants, fulfill your promises, and not to commit breach of trust, right? The first thing Baha'u'llah said was what? The foundation of human virtue is trustworthiness. Abu Sufyan has related that after this dialogue, the emperor explained to him through the interpreter the purpose of each of his questions and the conclusion that he had drawn from his answers. So he said that, if you had somebody who called himself a king before, then you have this idea, now you want power for yourself. If there are very influential people always coming in and all that, then again, maybe you're cooking some political ruse of something to get the power and all that. But when the poor and weak are coming into what you're teaching, it's always is that they actually are seeing some compassion and truth into what you're teaching, and that's what brings them. It's always been the case with God, right? I think it was Martyr Warka, when he was meeting Baha'u'llah, he had said that he thought in his head that he was so impressed with the whole scene, and he thought that why the kings of the world are not here. And Baha'u'llah right at that moment turns to him and says, if the kings were entered first, you would not have a seat here, right? So it's God's love and mercy that people like us are allowed to come in first, and then others come too. So he says, so what he drawn from his answers, which was in each case, so the emperor was in favor of the claimant after listening to these words, and he said, I knew that a prophet was about to be raised, but I did not imagine that he would be raised among you Arabs. This became a stumbling block for Jews as well, right? If what you have told me is true, I consider that the time is not far when this man will obtain dominion over the soil which is under my feet. This will come true in less than 6 years from this point, less than 8 years from this point. Were it possible for me, that's why I personally consider him that he had some semblance of belief in him, right? Were it possible for me, I would have gone to meet him. And if I had had this opportunity, I would have drawn comfort from washing his feet. That's your Roman emperor at the time. So Abu Sufyan's comment to his colleagues when they came out of the court were, and he said at this, everybody started bickering about something in the court, but they were not speaking the language they understood. They were dismissed. he said they left the court, and Abu Sufyan told his companions that this has made real deep effect on the emperor. And to him, it was as if he was afraid of this news. And so he said to his companion, it seems like the star of Muhammad is rising, right? So the star of Muhammad was rising before he said, I am, I am, I am. We just were too blind to see it. So then another letter was sent to, by the way, this letter was sent through the Ghassani king. There was another smaller kingship. They were allies to Romans. He actually asked Heraclius if he should send people and punish Muhammad for daring to send such a letter to the top emperor of the world. And Heraclius actually forbade him and asked him to actually meet him in the court, and they wanted to discuss these issues. There were certain problems in this Ghassani borders that happened within the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad that then brought the Muslim armies to the borders of Rome and Persia, and it continued because of that after. So we won't have time to in this class to cover that, but if anybody's interested, we can have some separate sessions on that. The second letter that we know of was sent to Khosrow Parvez of Sasani dynasty at the time. Baha'u'llah's bloodline actually meets this dynasty back, by the way, and not all of them were rulers like this, right? So again, what you're seeing is the Persia at its darkest declined time. There was time when it was a empire of God under Zoroastrian prophets, but that was not right now. There was a time when Arabia was under Ishmael and Abraham's faith, but that was not time right now that Prophet Muhammad had come, right? So major religions around the globe, again, at any time of universal manifestations are in their dark times. The societies are in darkness. That's when God sends the new messages. So the letter to Khosrow read similar things. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. At this point, the governorate of Yemen was under Persians, by the way. The governor of Yemen was a Persian. So in the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, from Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, to Khosrow's chief of Iran. This really troubled the king. Peace be on him who follows the guidance, believes in Allah and his messenger, and bears witness that there is no one worthy of worship save Allah, the one without associate, and that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. I invite you to call of Allah, as I am the messenger of Allah, to the whole of mankind, so that I may warn every living person, and so that the truth may become clear, and the judgment of God may overtake the disbelievers. I call upon you to accept Islam and thus make yourself secure. If you turn away, you will bear the responsibility for your subjects also. So same objection was raised by the king himself in this case that we know of, that was raised in Heraclius's court by his courtiers, that how dare he's putting his own name in. And so word Allah is unique to Persians, right? Because they call him Khuda from the Persian background. And so that's in itself. And then not only that Muhammad himself has used the name of Allah in his own name first, rather than the king's, but he called the king the chief of Iran rather than the king of Iran. Right? So he actually came down off his throne and he took the letter from the whoever was reading it, and he tore it in pieces. Very well established historical fact. He tore it to pieces, and the messengers were treated pretty disrespectfully and badly. And he said the words to the effect that all historians quote out, that you dust-laden camel herder smelling people come from this land and you're telling me what things need to be and whatever. And so he actually did not stop at this. He had sent the message to the governor of Yemen, who was under him, to send a deputation to armed guard to Medina and capture this guy, and bring him back to my court. So these people will reach Medina. Well, the news of his letter and stuff had reached Prophet Muhammad before, of course, people go back, and all of these were then, so then let's talk about him in a little bit for what the deputation did, and finish up the letters first. So another letter was sent to Egypt, who would be a governorate under Rome, and they were Christians, Coptic Christians. He had put some strange questions too but remember, as I said, very deepened believers were sent, who were capable of doing this. And he had actually, one of his things was he had asked the messenger, he was otherwise respectful, but he had some strange questions. So he asked, why didn't your prophet pray before you came here that I should become a believer, and therefore your Allah should make me into a believer? And the guy says, Christ never accomplished any such feat or asked any such prayers. Why would you ask for this? And then a couple of other things, the guy was answering him the same way, that, it didn't happen. So another thing he was asked was, if he's the Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah, how come that his people have just kicked him out of Mecca and he had to flee to Medina? And he was like, he's only had to flee to Medina, but the Jews captured Christ and hung him on a cross. Wasn't he Rasulullah? And so, of course, he backs off, right? He was like, okay, yeah, I mean, you're right? So he did not accept Islam, but he was very, very respectful. This is the letter that we have in museum in Turkey, by the way. Right? So it was discovered in 18th century, and this thing is the original one of it is available. But he did send. This is the one who would send two Coptic girls as gift, two sisters to Prophet Muhammad, a white mule that Prophet Muhammad actually did ride for the rest of his days. Baha'u'llah had a white mule too, remember? And two of them, actually, one after the other. And new clothing and stuff. So gifts like that were sent with the messenger back. So it's the marry the Copt, then Prophet Muhammad will marry, rather than keep her as a slave gift. And her sister was married off to another believer. It's from this marry the Copt, his last child was born, Abraham, that will pass away at 16 or 18 months of age before, towards the end of his life. So that's your Egyptians. Then the Ghazzanis received a letter, and the best one for us, for Baha'is was actually to the Queen Victoria, right? She had treated it with the most respect, and they still live. And in this case, the most respectful response came from Ethiopia. Remember, Muslims have migrated there. Prophet Muhammad's cousin Jafar, Ali's brother, was there, and 100 some other Muslims had been refugees in this country. He was a Christian king. It was a Christian kingdom. Prophet Muhammad sends him the letter, and pay attention to how this one was written, by the way. Right? So, in the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. To Muhammad, sorry, no, this is his answer. Hold on. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, from Muhammad, messenger of Allah, to the Negus, Najashi, which is a title, by the way. Khusro is a title, so that's why Pervez was his name. So all the kings are Khosros, all the kings are Caesars, but then they are individual people. This is Najashi is a title for the Ethiopian kings at the time. So Negus in Latin way. King of Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia. King of Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia. He's the only one who's actually been called the king. Even though several kingdom letters were sent out, they were all either called the chiefs of people, or which annoyed them actually, in a sense. But he's called by the king of Abyssinia. Peace be on you. I praise Allah, beside whom there is no other worthy of worship. The King, the most holy. God is the King, the most holy. The source of peace, the bestower of security, the protector. I bear witness that Jesus, son of Mary, was raised by the word of Allah, which he sent to Mary, because Muslims too, the Quran upholds virgin birth. That's what this is saying. I call you to Allah. The Arab Christians all call God Allah, still do. I call you to Allah, the one without associate, because Christ, the Trinity was come into Christianity at this point, and there was a major numbers of Coptic Christians who did not believe in that. They were heavily persecuted since the 3rd century or before, and therefore this actually caused Islam to grow in Egyptian, Syrian area where Coptic Christians were really, really bad, really wide and greatly, because when they saw what Quran was calling Christ, that's how they understood what Christ was, the messenger of God. and to cooperation with me in obedience to him and to follow me. To obedience to him, obedience to God, and follow me as a messenger, and to believing in that which has been revealed to me. For I am the messenger of Allah, and call you and your people to Allah, the Exalted. I have conveyed my message to you and have called you out of sincerity to the truth. Then respond to my sincere call. I have already sent my cousin Jafar and a party of Muslims to your country. Peace be on him who follows the guidance. That sentence, if you don't follow, you're responsible, does not exist in this letter. He's the only one who's been called by a king. His answer, Najashi, Negus, he raised the letter to his eyes. That's still an Asian gesture we do. Kiss it, put it to your eyes. And descending from his throne announced, I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Then he called and saved this letter too, and he wrote a letter back. It was, in the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, to Muhammad, messenger of Allah, from the Negus, Ashama. He did not say from the king of Ethiopia, just as me. None of us are kings in the court of God, right? If you're writing to the messenger of God and God back, then you are just a person. Peace be on you, messenger of Allah, and his mercy and his blessing. Allah, besides whom there is no one worthy of worship, is he who has guided me to Islam. Messenger of Allah, your letter has reached me by the Lord of heaven and earth. Jesus, peace be on him, is not any more than you have mentioned, even by a particle. He has already said this to Jafar when he was defending and he read the Surah of Maryam. I have recognized that with which you have been sent to us. I bear witness that you are a true messenger of Allah, whose truth has been testified to. I make my pledge at the hand of your cousin and embrace Islam for the sake of Allah, Lord of the world. Peace be on you and the mercy of Allah and his blessings. This was the Negus who died in the 9th year of Hijrah. When he died and the news arrived, Prophet Muhammad himself actually led a funeral prayer in absence in Medina in his honor. He was asked to send back the immigrants, and they did. They actually arrived towards the last couple of years of Hijrah. And then the daughter of Abu Sufyan, who had become Muslim, and she was one of the immigrants in Abyssinia, her husband had died, and Prophet Muhammad had taken her under his own nikah, and that was done by the king Najashi as well for him. The tribe of Yamama, Ghassans, and the others did not really answer favorably at all. So when the news was brought back to Prophet Muhammad, he said that for the Christians, for the Heraclius's treatment of the letter, said God will give them a respite, long respite. So they actually lived side by side with Islamic Empire for hundreds of years before Constantinople were finally taken. For the Persia, he said, as he tore God's message, his kingdom will be torn. And it was. So the deputation that was sent under the governor of Yemen, Badan, I think his name was, or Badan, I don't know how it's pronounced in Persian, Badhan. So he had sent a mounted guard, as he was required by the emperor, to Medina. And when they arrived, Prophet Muhammad met them in the mosque, and they delivered the message to him that the Khosrow is terribly mad at you, angry, and he had required that you accompany us and be brought in his court to him. And Prophet Muhammad smiled and said, why don't you rest and all that? They were all embassies were treated with a great amount of courtesy and care, and I will give you my answer tomorrow. They did warn him in very strong terms that you must adhere to this, or you don't know. I mean, he's the king of kings. He's Khosrow. He's going to send his armies and decimate your nations and your people if he don't take you back. He says, I got you, and go be rested tonight. Stay here, and I'll give you my answer tomorrow. The next morning, when they were brought into the mosque, Prophet Muhammad said, "Go tell your master," who was the governor of Yemen, because it's the governor of Yemen who sent this mounted escort. He says, "Go tell your master, my master has slain his master last night. Tell your master, my master has slain his master last night." So they were refused, of course, and they again tried to like really press on this. And the Prophet Muhammad said, "Yeah, we got your message. That's it. You can leave now." So when they reached back to Yemen and they told what the Prophet Muhammad has said, Badhan has immediately said in court, he met them in court and he said, if this prophecy comes true, then he would have been true messenger. Which within very short few days, the news arrived that it was Sherwan, I think his son's name was, who had murdered Pervez Khosrow in his bed at night and declared himself the king. So news arrived that, yeah. Huh? Sherwan? Yeah, he was the one who murdered Pervez Khosrow, his father, in sleep.
I'm not sure because
and declared kingdom over his own.
His title was Dodgar, which means benevolent, kind. So I don't know.
Yeah. He actually, his claim was that because the Khosrow Pervez apparently had become such a tyrant, and he said because the way what he was doing to the country, he felt it was his duty to do this. So he's murdered his. So God took care of him that night. It apparently happened when Prophet Muhammad said that day, right? So this prophecy coming true actually brought the governor of Yemen into Islam. He became Muslim, and so when Yemen came under Islam and stuff, he was kept as ruler, and his children were kept as rulers after that. That's that. And the deputations are sent all around for teaching. This is the time when Khyber was taken too, because the Jewish tribes were creating troubles. There were several other tribes that were taking during this time that were creating troubles. We won't go into all of those details. Someday, I hope that you will become a little bit more of a scholar of Islam and you can read them in details. We are just trying to get an overall of story for how this is happening. What else? The taking of Khyber is a very great story, actually. You should read it at some point, but we don't have time for all of them. We are gone a little bit over. We should be able to. I will stop.
While you were talking, I was looking for, I have it in Farsi, the reaction of Khosrow to the letter from Muhammad, but I can't find it now.
Yeah.
If I find it, I'll let you know.
Okay. So I will stop here. Any questions, concerns, comments?
I have a question. I'm wondering, so the Ethiopian king was the only one of the leaders that became Muslim.
Yemeni too, but he became Muslim after the prophecy came true.
Right. Okay, but Ethiopia I mean, the population, I never think of Ethiopia as Muslim.
No, so, Ethiopia. So after Najashi died, his nephew took over the kingdom, and he stayed Christian. He actually, to some degree, persecuted Muslims.
But they have quite a bit of.
They have a large population of Muslims, in Ethiopia.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. I guess kind of like the king of Samoa, he became Baha'i, but it's not like there's a majority of Baha'is right now in Samoa.
Well, of course, I mean, when there is no compulsion in religion, just because some leadership had become does not mean that everybody would. We have learned that in Arabian tribes as well. The tribes that were very fond of their leaders and had a great family life and unity among them, when those leaders became Muslims, lots of their people followed, but most others didn't. Some of the leaders were actually persecuted by common folks in their tribes after they became Muslim. It took them 10, 15 years when the prophecies started becoming true and the power started being, and the truthfulness started being established. Most of them came after. It took them a long time. Yeah. Both Ghassan and Yamama would have battles after that, which will take Muslims into Roman and Persian territories. And that's another side effect too, by the way. The Guardian warns us that, just a second.